Super excited to sit down and have this conversation with you two, Lars Ulrich from Metallica. I'm just going to repeat the same jokes. No, those of you that are listening, we've got Ulrich here and we've got Ratna here, and they're experts in advanced fitness technology. And I was joking before we started recording that I don't do a lot of shows on fitness because I don't like fitness. I hate working out. And it's become exponentially easier for me to get to like it because of technologies like the one that you've developed. And so when I find something that's short and effective and safe, I like to talk about it. Many of my listeners will know I'm a huge fan of OsteoStrong, a bone density training, as well as the X3 bar, both invented by a former guest, John Jaquish. The reason I like those is because they're scientifically viable, they're effective. More than anything, they're fast as hell. So we're going to be talking about the CAR.O.L bike and all things high and maximum intensity fitness. And we're going to really be looking at how we've evolved and how we can continue to evolve using technology. So first off, I'll start with you, Ratna. How did you get started in this industry? What's your background? How did you end up getting in fitness tech?
Right. Like you, I don't like fitness. I'd do anything but, go jogging or spend hours on the treadmill. I'm actually a management consultant, and before that I was a microbiologist. And it was through a disease management program that I was doing in Abu Dhabi, where diabetes is the second highest in the world. And I had trouble getting people to exercise. Then I thought, how do you get people to exercise when they have to spend time on treadmills or whatever? And everybody says, I just don't have the time. I don't have the time. So I literally was sitting back in London in my bedroom thinking, how am I going to get these people to exercise? And he sends me a text to say, watch BBC Two Horizon now. So I watched BBC Two Horizon, and it was a program about the science of high-intensity training. And it's not high intensity as you know it. It was true HIIT, like the scientific HIIT. And the person who presented it is a doctor, and he's diabetic. And he took this special bike home and did the exercise 3 times a week for 4 weeks. And he would do it in his suit. And he'd get off and say, look, no sweat. And he came back and tested his insulin. It had improved by 24%, his insulin sensitivity.
That's a high number, right?
Oh, it's
wow.
Nothing. Your drugs can't deliver that in that short time.
Even
Absolutely
pharmaceuticals?
Not in that short time.
Wow.
Absolutely. And he got, just healthier as a result of it in more than one way, not just insulin control. And of course, I watched this and my light bulbs are going off in my head. I call him excitedly, this is great, we've got to do this. So we go out and buy the next day exercise bikes and say, let's try and do this ourselves. And we failed miserably. Either it was too hard and we'd grind to a halt, or it was not hard enough, or we'd sweat. I thought, something's wrong. We're doing something wrong. So we called the scientists on the television, and particularly Dr. Niels Vollard, brilliant guy, who has researched this for donkey's years, 20 years, is an exercise physiologist, PhD. And it turns out that it is true HIIT. It is not something that you can necessarily do by yourself at home. It does require a computer-generated resistance. It has to be personalized to each person, and it needs to follow a particular protocol. Now, the reason it's so short is because, you trade time for intensity. So in 20 seconds, you're going to have to work bloody hard. So it's maximum intensity training, minimal time, and all the magic that needs to happen happens during those 2 20-second sprints. And they lead to incredible results. And sorry if I'm kind of going on and on a bit.
No, that's what we do here.
Okay.
Anyone that listens to this show knows we go on and on. That's the whole point.
In that case, do we up till tomorrow?
People can go listen to some 45-minute podcast if they don't have the time. We go hard here. The interview I did before you guys was 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wow.
I can barely introduce myself in the first 45 minutes, let alone talking to the guest. Jeez.
So, and I don't want people to just think that this is some sort of bro science, because, it isn't. And certainly, we're serious people, and we put all our life savings into this business, because we felt it's not just for diabetics, but for the majority of the population that doesn't exercise. Now, 80% in general. And inactivity is no longer now a noun, it's a disease category. And our healthcare systems are already on their knees. They're going to be absolutely crippled in the next several years. And we have to take responsibility as people. And if you truly are telling us that, it's time that's holding you back, well, now is a solution that is also effective. And if you're not going to exercise despite that and help yourself, then, good luck to you. So lucky for us, we've been independently tested by the American Council on Exercise against government guidelines. And the system outperformed government guidelines phenomenally, minute amount of time. So, I can safely say that this science of high-intensity training, of true high-intensity training, is now finally available for the masses. Up until now, it was the prerogative of the scientific laboratories, and they do use special equipment, they do use special programs, computer programs. So it's not as trivial as just cranking up the resistance and going for it. And it's what I love about this whole idea is because it makes logical and emotional sense to me. As human beings, as we've evolved, we weren't supposed to go jogging all the time, because if we did, we wouldn't have the energy to run away from the tiger, and our species wouldn't have survived. So caveman walked looking for food, or he ran for his life. And that's what I think, the science, true HIIT does. It simulates the flight, you being in the savannah, running away from the tiger, your flight or fight response, and your body just knows that if you're asking for more power, more energy, more oxygen, it's going to have to change to give you all of that. Because as humans, we are fantastically adaptive. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We adapt. And so your body adapts to give you what it thinks you need. If you turned into a couch potato, everything that your body, I just don't want to give anything to him. So, everything slows down. Your fitness goes, your insulin goes up, and you just become sluggish. So the adaptations goes both ways. And I really believe that there is something here that can put a little dent in this pandemic that affects the world. And if I can, if we can do a little bit to help that, it would be job done.
Yeah, well, I'm on board with the fact that our sedentary, and especially indoor sedentary lifestyle is what makes us sick. I mean, this is, I don't know, it's just the way that my mind thinks about things. Like, I was coming down the road here in an Uber the other day in London, and I saw this massive hospital. And I looked at that hospital, and I looked at all these other buildings around it that were of equal size, and I thought, wow, this is so strange. No other animal, animals, granted, aren't capable of building a structure in most cases, except a goddamn beaver or something. But let's just say beavers, okay? Yeah. Beavers don't live a lifestyle that is so toxic that they have to go build a special giant beaver dam just to house all their sick and dying beavers.
Yes, exactly.
Deer don't all migrate to a certain prairie and all just keel over and die because they've got diabetes and cancer and what God knows what, right? It's like humans, we've become industrialized and domesticated, and we just accept this idea that we're eventually going to end up in hospital and get drugs or surgery to fix us and prop us up until we eventually die. Yeah. No other species on the planet has such unnatural levels of sickness and death. And I just think it's so weird. If you think about that, just listeners, next time you drive by a hospital, just think about how weird that is, that the way we live is so antithetical to our health, longevity, and well-being, that we have to erect buildings all over the world to just house all the sick people. Yeah,
because what you're saying is that even our lifestyles create those mutations in our genes.
That's all it is.
And so we even get new diseases that we didn't know about.
Yeah, generation after generation, we get sicker and sicker and sicker. When you look at the work of Weston Price, and he goes, he's a dentist, he went around the world and studied longest lived and healthiest, most robust people. And you look at the photos he took of these people, they all have perfectly straight teeth. They're super ripped. They're very lean. They're just beasts of people, like human apes, just strong and massive and beautiful. And those were hunter-gatherer people that weren't living under fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
They weren't drinking fluoridated water. They weren't breathing chemtrails. They weren't living under 5G radiation. I mean, now it's exponentially worse than ever. But this idea of the sedentary, see, you go off on a tangent, you instigate me. It's your fault. No,
That's all right.
Tangents are great.
Yeah, it's like the sedentary lifestyle combined with the toxic food, the lack of minerals in the soil, all of that stuff. And like, here we are. So now we're at a turning point. And I think thanks to the proliferation of transformative information, like people like you were able to bring to the table, especially in long form media, such as the one I'm producing now, we really do have an opportunity to start to, live in the modern world, but turn the clock back. And
Absolutely.
I think finding convenient, fast ways to move and mimic how we would have moved in the past is the way out. Because let's face it, no one's going to suddenly get a bunch of time and be like, you know what? I'm just going to spend 5 hours a day as a hunter-gatherer and drive out to the woods and run around and climb trees and chase bears and whatever, So anyway, I love this whole idea. Ulrich, how did you get involved in this thing?
So, we've been working together for a long time. We've been running disease management programs together. And so the kind of, as Ratner said, we had the initial discovery, tried it out, wanted to bring it, first, literally see whether we can replicate it. And tried and failed with the equipment that was available. And then searched around, looked whether there was something available that we could use and bring out, and it didn't. There was a very clear gap in the market where kind of super compelling science kind of lived in a dark corner of a university, and researchers were happy to publish papers. But somehow the translation to kind of a mass market and kind of to make that dent, that didn't happen. And so, together we set out to develop that product. Took a lot of time and energy.
A lot of time and a lot of money.
Exactly.
All our money,
as
initially.
Said.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's get into a little bit of the science on elements of fitness, cardiovascular health, all of this kind of stuff, and specifically high intensity training, or as people call it, HIIT training. My brother's a fitness expert of the highest order, and for a time I was going to work out with him, and he does functional movement, things like this, but to burn fat, to increase your overall strength and all of that, we would do a lot of what we call high intensity interval training, right? So he'd have these special timers, ding, 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 and they go off, and then you'd go manic and do all kinds of crazy stuff, and then you'd stop and do these special breathing exercises, then start again. And it was all very regimented, and I don't know who developed those programs exactly, but the idea there, as I fundamentally understood it, was, you, again, as you indicated, that in nature we would have had these sort of sprints and been running towards something or away from something, then we would stop and rest and catch our breath, and so it's kind of a natural way that we've evolved. But what is high-intensity training, and why is that good for you versus just jogging 40 miles or just going and lifting heavy weights for 20 minutes or 3 hours and all this kind of stuff?
Right. So forgive me for saying this, but if you can do high intensity training for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even a minute, it's not true high intensity training because it's physically unsustainable if you do it correctly. So the science is quite simply that you are giving your body a message. It's about stimulus and response and adaptation. So by giving the stimulus of extreme power, I need a lot more oxygen for the energy, I need to get my blood flowing really, really fast, the response the body has to make is to be able to give you all of those things. Otherwise you'd be extinct as a species. And therefore the humans, being as good as they are at adapting, they adapt. You don't necessarily get that strong stimulus and response when you're doing endurance or you're doing other things, if you're walking. Like I said, we adapt. If you walk, your body will adapt to you walking. If you do CrossFit, your body will adapt to you doing CrossFit. If you do spinning, your body will adapt to you doing spinning. If you sit on the potato couch, your body will adapt to that. If you do high intensity training like Tabata, that's what it'll adapt to.
Tabata. That's what I was doing.
Yeah, Tabata.
Potato, Tabata. Yeah.
Tabata. I've done it too. I think Tabata, what they've been doing has been fantastic. And but who the hell's going to do those bloody burpees, and who's going to run up and down those freaking stairs? And it's okay now and then, but it's and then looking at the timer, and it's just like too much faff. People like me who are fundamentally lazy just kind of go, you know what, I'm not going to do it, forget it. So
I like that you just own that right now.
Well, I think these guys will tell you. I most certainly speak my mind, and that includes about me. So yes, I'm lazy. So the idea of getting it over and done with in a very short time means it is a trade. It's not for pussies by any chance. You get on there and you work like a dog. You feel you're going to need an epidural, or at least you think you'll need one.
And
but that's
also
the price you pay. And it's about adaptation, and I can go into the exact molecular changes that happen, which I'd love to.
Please, yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It's so you talk about Tabata, and we could talk about Wingate sprints, and there's kind of different protocols, and many of them work, and Wingate sprints work.
What is that?
Mm-hmm.
So a Wingate sprint it's been around for a long time, been developed in Israel decades ago, literally, and that is kind of a short maximum intensity sprint, and our bike CAR.O.L implements a form of a Wingate sprint. And there's research paper, shelves full of them, that have demonstrated the effectiveness of the Wingate sprint. So there's no question about that. The next quest then for researchers was just to go around and say, kind of what's the minimum effective dose? How much do you really have to do to get the benefit, and kind of what's the pathway, what triggers the benefit? And actually both are very well understood now. So we understand very well what is the pathway, and if Ratna has the time, she can go through all the molecular changes. And kind of what is the minimum effective dose, because it really is, it's almost like a switch, So it's been tried with 30-second sprints, 40-second sprints, kind of various numbers of sprints. And, after they found researchers around the world, different groups, after they found kind of this works, went down to titrate really what is the minimum effective dose. And it came down to 2 20-second sprints. That is all that's needed to flick that switch. And if you go any lower than that, if you did only one sprint, or if you do 10-second sprints, there's no additional benefit. So, there's no benefit. Like you just don't get the gain. On the other hand, if you did like 30-second sprints, which are a lot rougher on you, so you'll...
when you're talking about working at maximum,
absolute
not high intensity, but maximum intensity,
all out, running for your life.
3 seconds is the longest 3 seconds of your life.
Oh, slow.
Exactly. It's 20 seconds sounds short, but when you're on the bike, it's actually bloody long, So those give you the same benefits, but it's just a lot rougher and a lot harder on your body. And therefore, kind of that's really what CAR.O.L does. It's the minimum effective dose of this kind of Wingate sprint of true high-intensity training.
Give me the biology.
So the biology...
For the geeks in the audience.
Okay, fine. So
I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but one of our bright listeners will.
I'm sure you will.
No, I'm just kidding. But I tend to like the broad strokes, but I know I do have a lot of listeners that appreciate when we really go into the deep water. So let's do it.
I'm going to broad stroke here as well a little bit. So it all begins with what's called glycogen depletion.
I've heard of that.
Right. So glycogen is the storage form of sugar. You have it in your muscles. The biggest stores are in your legs, thighs, your buttocks. And
not my buttocks.
Yeah, you're just.
There's nothing there.
Oh, come on! I actually saw that. It looked quite cute, actually. Sorry, I'm married for years. He's gone red.
I saw that giant ring.
Yeah, well, he's going. Did I make you blush?
Don't look at this video, folks.
Anyway, so the sugar storage is called glycogen, and you trigger it. You deplete it. Now you can do it through jogging for 45 minutes. Exactly. or you can do it in a HIIT class, but it'll take at least 15, 20, 25 minutes.
I'm going to add the obligatory to that too.
And or you can do it in a pressure cooker. Like, you do a lot of kundalini, so you'll understand. You probably eat Indian food. So I always say it's like cooking lentils. You can cook it on the stove for a long time, or in the microwave in 10 minutes, or you can pressure cooker it in 2 minutes. So real HIIT is the pressure cooker of exercise. And the key here is rapid glycogen depletion. Rapid. And as it's a pity you didn't see all the people doing their rides today, but pretty much everybody will go whoop, peaks within 5 to 10 seconds of the first sprint, and the peak power that they'll reach will be for a fraction of a second. After that, the power drops. And that's the idea. That's when your glycogen depletion trigger has happened. And so you're starting to lose power because you just cannot sustain it any longer. So by the end of 20 seconds, you are absolutely fatigued. So when glycogen depletion is triggered, other molecular changes happen. Molecules that are necessary for various changes in your body get released, principally AMPK. And then in the second sprint, you don't really have much glycogen depletion going on there. It's more the activation of the molecules that were released in the first sprint. And the most important activation is of something called PGC1 alpha. And it's like a master switch, it's like the master regulator. And it's just a cascade of things that go on. And ultimately, you end up having more mitochondria, including in your heart. Your heart's a muscle. You have more bendy arteries just because your body is needing to get that blood where it needs to be very quickly. You just become better at using and taking in oxygen and using it. And obviously the insulin is a very important part of this. And this I find always really fascinating is that, as I said, we've got muscles that store sugar. And your thighs, in particular, back to the evolutionary response, they will burn sugar either locally or they'll suck it in. Let's say that you are completely deprived of sugar and all your fat reserves are gone. It goes the last place they'll go to, and the muscles will not give out the sugar unless it is absolutely vital, right? They're not ready to give that out. It's local burning or sucking it in. Your liver is different. It'll store glycogen, but it also releases it for when you need energy. The fat gets turned into sugar for you to be using as energy, not the same with your muscles. So when we target the biggest muscle group that you've got, your body literally is in panic, because if that sugar goes and you don't have access to energy, you're going to die as a human. And what happens to your species, right? So the insulin, as you know, is responsible for putting sugar into muscle, transporting sugar. And since they lose the sugar, they go into panic reaction and they say, refuel, refuel, refuel. And so whatever sugar is in your blood then starts to get sucked up and goes into your muscles for restocking so that you can use it later. That's insulin dependent. And over time, the insulin receptors come up further and further up to the surface of your muscular tissue. And so in the presence of a tiny amount of insulin, the muscles just like become wonderful sugar soakers, sponges. They just suck it up. And insulin goes. And that's what you want. You don't want high levels of insulin hanging around, because in the presence of high insulin, you will not be able to burn sugar, because the body thinks that it already has enough sugar in your bloodstream. So it's not letting more in. It needs to get rid of it. So you start peeing it out or whatever. So that's a very important part of this workout. The fact that your insulin sensitivity improves so much and you just get so much better at it. So it just turns into a leaner person. So, everything you need from a health perspective just increases. And obviously you lose fat as well.
So now we're discovering that so many of not just some of the ineffective high-intensity interval training that's popular. Not to say that, I'm sure it has its benefits and it's good for you. It's better than sitting on your ass, right? But some of the things I'm thinking of, I'm going back to the 80s, like aerobics classes and how people got really into jogging long distances and running marathons and all this stuff. And many of the people that are into more of the kind of cardio and aerobic-based exercises, not all, but many of them aren't necessarily people with bodies that I would choose if I could choose one. You know what I mean? How do you think that we got off on sort of the wrong track of these forms of fitness and exercise that are ineffective? You know, was someone trying to sell more sneakers in the 80s or 70s when jogging became popular and aerobics, exercise, and all this kind of stuff? Like, where did kind of the ineffective stuff come into vogue?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to let Ulrich speak because I'll shut up, otherwise I'll never shut up. And I'll just say that the other forms of exercise are not ineffective. They're not as effective enough. That's the point. And we've had loads of people come in now saying they work out a lot, they do this, they do that, and they're going to get fit. And then we have scores, we have fitness scores, and they were woefully low. And so, you know, you're not as fit as you can be. So it's not that they're ineffective. They work to a certain degree. But
so why have they become popular? I couldn't tell you. I really don't know. I think it's just lack of, you know, education and, you know, that kind of good insight, good science, good evidence just didn't travel. I mean, this year's a different thing now, right? That through podcasts, through the internet, through kind of like all the people who take that message out to the people that it spreads, that the message spreads. But I don't think anybody had like the knowledge and the incentive to actually tell people. If you look at traditional gyms, you know, they've got their kit. They want people to spend time there, sell personal training sessions and so on. It's not about minimum effective dose. It's just kind of, you know, just selling on and on their established business model.
Right. So that's sort of like the, you know, elements of the pharmaceutical industry that suppress information that gives people autonomy and control over their own health and biology, right? Where they don't.
Maybe it's just an element of laziness. Who knows? But if you're a big gym chain and you've got all your floor space filled with treadmills and ellipticals and upright and recumbent bikes, and you've got that stuff. Now you put a CAR.O.L bike next to it. It's a very confusing message. You've been doing it all wrong all this time, all this many years.
And I spent millions on all that kit.
Well, I would like you to support my conspiracy theory thread.
I love it. I love
that gyms want to keep people in there on not only a literal treadmill, but a theoretical treadmill. And perhaps, to some degree, they're designed to be ineffective out of laziness or lack of knowledge or understanding, but perhaps to sell, you know, more training sessions, and that's probably really where they make their money, aside from people like me that buy a membership and literally never go once in 2 years. Yeah. So
it's not a conspiracy theory. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, good.
I couldn't agree with you more.
I love when conspiracy theories are not theories, but they are in fact conspiracies.
But I tell you, it's true because we've firsthand experienced it, right? We've literally been told by some people, oh, well, we've got all this kit in here now, and if we put this in, people are not going to use the other kit, and we just spent, you know, hundreds and thousands on them. And we're like, okay. Other people have been really, really quite upfront about it and say, well, look, you know, we make most of our money through personal training. And this is going to hit our personal training market. So it's not something that and the other things that we've been told is we don't want people coming in here for 10 minutes and then they're going.
Right. They're going to buy less like sugary smoothies and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So on the gym piece, you know, I'm thinking back to like when I first was coerced by my kind of fitness-friendly brothers to go to the gym back in the day. There was this idea that you had to warm up, you know. So everyone, the first thing you do is you hit the treadmill and, you know, you get your blood pumping. It kind of made sense to me. And then you would go lift weights or something like that, right? So when you use the CAR.O.L bike, because now I've got one in my garage and I'm using it and freaking love this thing, there's like a little kind of warm up, but you're barely doing anything. I mean, you're like a mouse could pedal the pedals. Like if they had long enough legs, you're doing that,
and then
and then you're going 20 seconds. You just literally like your head is exploding because it's so difficult and intense. And then there's another little rest, and there's another 20-second sprint. But there's not really like a warm-up per se, and your body's not even feeling warm. You're not sweating. So is the theory of like, well, we need to warm up before we do some intense lifting or some more intense work, like, is there a reason to even like warm up in the classical sense?
Yes, there is, but it doesn't have to be long. Initially, we had a 3-minute warm-up. And again, the researchers, they keep changing, and they say, well, you don't need the 3 minutes. It actually doesn't help or doesn't add anything. So we've cut it down to 2, and has made no difference at all to the performance of people scientifically. What is more important, and we haven't done this just because I just personally don't think it's necessary, but the last 3 minutes of cool down could be a little bit longer, like a minute more, so 4 minutes, is because blood pressure really needs to come back up at the end of the ride. Because you have so many, waste products now, and you've broken down so much glycogen that the water in your blood gets sucked into your muscles just from the osmotic effect. And I'm sure you feel like your thighs feel fairly full and pumped, and it's because of the water. And eventually, but when water goes, your blood volume drops, and that affects your blood pressure. So we just want to bring that back up again. So that's why you just, again, nothing that, hopefully there's a lot of people who, I don't want to keep talking about us, but it's all scientific. Don't need 3 minutes. 2 is enough. Ulrike, you were going to say something?
No, I wasn't actually, sorry.
Okay.
So this idea is valid. It's just not necessarily that we sit there for 45 minutes on a treadmill and then go do the workout.
No.
I think that was always what was irritating to me. I don't want to go spend 3 hours in the gym.
No.
Yeah. And I think it also depends a bit what exercise you do. If you do something with like lots of jerky, sudden movements or high impact exercises, maybe it's better to be a little bit stretched and warmer. But if you're doing something like a bike, which is very low impact and actually very gentle on your joints, even when you go absolute max intensity, and it's very safe. You just don't need any kind of extended warm-up period.
Well, that's another interesting part about the whole fitness thing that has been confusing to me, going back to, again, like evolutionarily speaking, how humans have moved. And I don't believe we are apes, right? Branch of apes.
Yep.
And so when you look at the way that we would move in nature, we'd be squatting and picking berries and climbing up a tree and doing all kinds of movements that are non-repetitive. They're totally random. And then you go in a gym and you're like locked into these machines making these very limited range of motion, I guess because they're safe and just mechanically more viable to put load on something that's got a bunch of right angles, etc. But it has never really jived with me in terms of how a human would naturally move. So that brings me to, to play devil's advocate, even though sitting on like a stationary bike, which has never appealed to me at all, because I don't even like riding real goddamn bikes, is that we're doing a very unnatural movement. There's nothing in nature that you'd sit there and pedal, right?
That's right.
So what about that piece?
Yeah.
So then do we have to compensate by going and, doing joint mobility and moving around like an ape at some other time?
No, so we recognize that, but we've made it really, really short.
Okay.
So one thing, you use your biggest muscle groups, you use your quads, your glutes, and you want to kind of have that rapid glycogen depletion in your biggest muscle groups. So that's very good. And the other thing is very safe. It's a very safe, low impact movement that very many people can do. So my mom's 78 and she uses the bike every other day.
Really?
And we have actually a bunch of users who kind of are fairly senior in age, and it's just something that's still very accessible to them, and that can be done. Treadmill could be so. I mean, a little side story. When people tell you, oh, you can do burpees and you can run up a stair. So kind of after we couldn't get the exercise to work on a conventional bike, we tried running up the stairs. And our third partner kind of sprained his ankle.
Oh, damn.
On the second attempt.
Damn.
So kind of like the safety of the exercise is reasonably important. And that's kind of one reason why we've chosen the bike as the modality to implement it. But it's really, really short. And yes, so I do like compound movement exercises, body weight exercises then for resistance and strength training, for example. And there I fully sign up to kind of natural movement, functional movement. So that's the right thing.
And that's actually very key. What he's just said is that once you feel fitter, feel better about yourself, you just do more. You, instead of taking the escalator, you do climb the stairs. You just, pick up things and you're just more able to. And for me, when I literally see people whose identity is of a non-exerciser and they're embarrassed about it, I feel non-exerciser. When their identity switches to, I am an exerciser, and by the way, I do something really hard, all of a sudden they're doing so much more.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
there's a momentum or sort of an inertia there.
An identity switch.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, so many of these things just take on it. We are, as you say, apes. Herd instinct was still in us. We follow the pack. And you do group jogging. Yeah, it's very social. People love that element of it. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it is a bit of an entry drug. So Ratna kind of came out earlier and said she was lazy. We were all kind of like...
You were lazy. You were lazy.
We were in our target group. Yeah, we were our own target market. Yeah, we were kind of busy professionals working mainly in healthcare, kind of advising healthcare clients. And then we developed the bike. And from there, at least, so my personal journey was, okay, you get fitter with the bike, and then suddenly you feel like, yeah, I can also do resistance training. And I have to almost say I enjoy going for a run now, even though that wouldn't have occurred to me.
Do you think as a result of doing this AI-assisted, which we're going to get into the AI part, obviously, this AI-assisted, not high intensity, but maximum intensity training, I mean, can you really feel the differences? So if you want to go sprint or jog or lift weights or do resistance training, are you more of a beast because of the capacity of your heart and the blood flow and oxygenization and all that?
Absolutely. So my and I've got this kind of the lab reports. So we did before after VO2 max measurements. My VO2 max increased by some 50%.
What?
Yeah. So that's and then
and how long?
Oh, that's maybe a 6 months period or so.
Damn, son.
Yeah.
Well, 50%, but you did 20% quicker than that, didn't you?
So, yeah, I've got kind of, I mean, there's all, the data is all there. And that's quite interestingly, so the researchers who developed the HIIT protocol, so that's our kind of the reduced exertion, high intensity training, true HIIT, also developed a gene test to kind of predict based on your genetic makeup how much you should improve. And it's unfortunately it's phenomenally effective on average, and it's phenomenally effective for the broad masses. Unfortunately, there's a small group who are non-responders. So that will, they get other health benefits out of it, insulin sensitivity, blood pressure improvement, and so on. But their VO2 max, their fitness will not improve based on that.
Oh, they will, but not as much.
Yeah.
Or it'll be slower.
Yeah. And then on the other end, there's super responders, really athletic people who you kind of add that, and it's like a drop of magic. It's like pixie dust, and they become super athletic. So I had the genetic test done before I started, and they've predicted that I was a moderate responder based on genetic makeup. And they've predicted that I could maybe between 10 and 15% improve my VO2 max through this exercise. And I mean, sure enough, I did improve it by 10 to 15% in the first 8 weeks. Then it just continued. It continued and continued and continued. So I do wonder, there's some kind of, and from...
Well, it's epigenetics, Ulrich.
Yeah, exactly. So adding in then other things so intermittent fasting, adding in cold showers and
stacking the hacks.
Yeah, exactly. And adding in resistance training as well, kind of just adds it up and kind of, I think there is, exactly as Ratna said, the epigenetics that kind of overrode that initial, predicted threshold and gave me a way higher boost. And then, if you're good at something, you'll enjoy it and can also do a 5K run in a reasonable time, even without training to run.
Yeah. What's VO2 max that you increase 50% within about 6 months, which is that's uncommon? Explain to people what that means.
So VO2 max is how much oxygen you can metabolize kind of per period of time. And it's basically your aerobic capacity, and it would be measured kind of either on a treadmill or a bike, where you continuously increase the resistance and measure constantly how much kind of oxygen you breathe in and carbon dioxide you breathe out. And that's literally the measure for your cardiovascular fitness.
And future health.
And kind of probably the most important predictor of future health.
Really? Wow,
yes.
so it's a really big deal.
Yep.
Absolutely.
More so than like how much sit-ups you can do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or some other metric. Of
Yes,
like,
yes, definitely.
I picture like old sailors in the 50s. It's like, how many push-ups can you do? How many pull-ups can you do? How many sit-ups can you do? And then whoever does the most is the most fit. So we've obviously moved beyond that.
Yeah.
I want to ask something of either of you, and Ratna, you were talking about this glycogen depletion, where we're drawing this sugar energy from our muscles, right? And when you're doing high intensity training, that's the point of it. How does this relate to calories? And how does it relate to burning fat? And could you explain how we've moved on from this antiquated idea that calorie in and calorie out means something, right? So if I eat a piece of pizza and it's 1,200 calories or whatever pizza is, yum, pizza, I'm so hungry. I eat that piece of pizza. I haven't eaten all day. I'm like,
me neither. There's a Pizza Express down the road.
Right before our interview, I had a very interesting. I had a San Pedro infused chocolate. So that might be why I'm in such a happy mood. Anyway, that's all I've eaten in many hours, so I can't believe I'm even here. But anyway, back to the piece of pizza. So that's got 800, 1,200 calories, whatever it is, right? And then so I eat that, and I'm like, oh, damn, I just took a hit for X amount of calories. Now I'm going to go get on the treadmill, and I'm going to watch the little handheld heart monitor, and I'm going to get up to 1,200 calories, and now I'm even. But if I want to be losing fat or burning fat, now I want to get up to, say, 2,000 calories. And from what I understand, that model is antiquated, not scientific,
Absolutely.
and totally whack. So
And
could you demystify that for us?
It is completely antiquated, and it's particularly antiquated, and I find this irritating, is that on the treadmill, on anything else, that giving you your actual calorie burn, which is such a wild, rough estimate.
It is?
It's crazy estimate.
Okay.
And the reason why we don't put it on our system is because unless we have measured it and are quite confident that it is applicable to each individual person and it's accurate and not just a wild guess, we won't put it on. But I'll explain about that in a minute. The calorie issue is very, very interesting. It's like so funny. It's like, again, forgive me, but on the CAR.O.L bike, you don't sweat because you work hard for just 2 20-second sprints. Your body doesn't get hot enough to start sweating. Now, literally everybody associates a good, hard workout with sweat, right? Oh, I'm dripping in sweat. I can so easily hack that. I can go sit in a sauna, come out in my gym kit.
That's immediately what I thought.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And go, I've just been for a reel. That spin class was bloody hard and I really worked out. Look at me. I'm such a, hardcore person type thing. It's a myth. You sweat because you get hot. Now, when you're exercising for a longer period of time, you are going to get hot, right? When you're exercising for a short period of time, you're not going to get hot. And correct, there's not much of a calorie burn when you're doing something like that. But what you are doing is your what's called EPOC, your excess post-oxygen, exercise post-oxygen consumption is massive. Why? Because I'm sure you can testify to this. When you are doing this exercise, the demand on your body for oxygen is massive. You go straight into what's called anaerobic exercise, which is exercise or energy production in the absence of oxygen, because your body just can't supply oxygen fast enough. But in order to try and do it, because you could be dead, right? It has to put all other processes in your body on hold. Now, everything that you do in your body requires oxygen, everything, right? And so those processes after the exercise is over need to be completed. So your body is busy finishing all of the stuff off. And again, all of that also needs oxygen. So for the next 24, 48 hours, you are metabolizing at a much higher rate. So that's how the calorie burn works. with this kind of exercise. And we have measured, or rather the University of Colorado has measured EPOC when they did the research on us. And they've given us the data, we just haven't had time to analyze it. But once that analysis comes up, we will show calorie burn, and it will be from a scientific base, and it will be you. Sorry.
Wow, interesting. So
the other thing is kind of also just like calories in, calories out. If you do burn more calories, many people just overcompensate and then just eat too much afterwards to basically offset, because like you will be more hungry if you've done a long endurance exercise, whereas with CAR.O.L, with that short intensity sprint, you actually have like a suppression of appetite even, so you wouldn't feel immediately afterwards like you want to eat something. And so I do it in a fasted state, and I can go on like for a long time afterwards, still kind of just because the appetite is further suppressed. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, kind of for anybody who's concerned about weight management, I think the importance of insulin is just super important, as Ratna mentioned earlier. Insulin regulates how we store kind of sugar and how we access energy from our fat stores. And if you have low levels of insulin sensitivity, it's incredibly hard to lose weight, basically. It's incredibly hard to attack your fat stores. And it's a bit unfair. So even if you reduce calorie intake, but you have insulin resistance, not much happens. Whereas
this is why obese people that starve themselves don't lose weight.
Yeah, it's one of the factors. Yeah.
Part
exactly.
of the puzzle?
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
And
I mean, I know for me, it's like there was a point. I mean, it didn't last long, but I was like, I'm going to watch my calories, and then I was like, ice cream is awesome. I'm not going to do that anymore. But it didn't matter. Like for me, the amount of calories has never mattered, and it has no relation to the amount of exercise I do or don't do. Really, it doesn't really seem to move the needle. Which is why I was just curious about how that works.
No, and you're absolutely right. So insulin is super important, and it's if you're kind of in that low insulin sensitivity state, insulin resistant state, not only is it like really unhealthy because you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, but it makes it incredibly hard to do anything about body weight.
And also just to, like you had a chocolate muffin, to burn that off, 100 calories, you actually have to go for a long time. For a good 45 minutes
I know,
or so.
that's what's annoying. When I used to get on those exercise, the treadmills, it was like, are you kidding me? I've been on here, I'm dying for 30 minutes and I burned 200 calories or something. Like, you take one bite of anything and you just like undid that. So it was super frustrating, which is why I think I just kind of like, well, I don't even care if it's valid science. I'm just not going to bother.
Yeah.
And also, isn't there a difference between the source of the calorie, right? So if I go eat 14 donuts, that's a lot different than like 3 tablespoons of ghee. They might have the same like caloric load, but we're talking about ketones versus glucose.
Exactly.
You got anything to say about that?
I mean, that it works.
I know it's kind of not directly relevant to the conversation.
No. We're big fans. I personally do basically Monday to Friday my bulletproof intermittent fasting, where I have the buttered coffee in the morning and then kind of like a 16-hour fasting window, and it works beautifully for me. High energy levels, no crashes, and even kind of so I love to do the exercise in a fasted state. That's kind of works particularly well. And then, I mean, I just try to avoid processed sugar wherever I can, because I know it makes me feel. It tastes nice, tastes like candy, yeah. But it's just you feel the energy up and down, so quite severely. Whereas if I'm low sugar, kind of a bit higher on the fat side, it's just a much nicer day, and then I'm just performing better, yeah.
And that's again, the myth again. So many things have just been missold, like the fat, right? The ghee versus the donuts. Now, if you had the donuts are sugar and fat, which is the lethal combination, right? If you had the two together, it's...
Oh, yeah. What's up with that? Because that's the most delicious food. The most delicious foods on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. And what's the only other natural product where that occurs?
Oh, man.
Honey?
Is there?
No, it's breast milk. Breast milk. What? Yeah, exactly. So there's nothing in nature that has sugar and fat in it. And so that just kind of, that just our brains are not wired to kind of feel satiated. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Satiated.
So we can't stop.
Satiated?
So if you
What is it?
Sated.
Sated?
I think so.
Are you sure that's not a British thing?
maybe it's a
Probably
British
it's a
thing. So in Germany, no.
In Germany,
Yeah, no, it kind of our natural
You will feel
response
satisfied.
to stop eating is just kind of eliminated. And if you have like this mixture of 50-50 sugar and fat, we're just not made for it. And other animals neither. So good research on mice, yeah, that you can feed them as much fatty food as you want, have unlimited access, and they will not overeat, and they will still stay lean and healthy. As much sugary food as they could eat, they will stay lean and healthy. You mix it up and give them cheesecake or donuts, and they get obese. Kind of
Really?
invariably.
That
Yes.
must be what
And
my
that
problem is.
It's
Because
just
I love the two together.
it just
I guess I
doesn't
love
exist
breast milk.
in nature.
I just cracked
other than
the code.
breast milk.
You just
Breast milk.
cracked the code. I wasn't breastfed. I found out to my horror a couple of years ago, and for multiple reasons, and so that's why I like eating cheesecake. There it is.
Yeah, it all
Fat and
reminds
sugar.
of the good
But
old
why-
times.
But
when we
other than the fact that it doesn't exist in nature, which is fascinating, except in breast milk, why is combining fat and sugar bad for us? Like, what's the problem with that?
I think it's just we overeat. So I think it is because you can't stop. It's so tasty.
So
it's so delicious.
The brain switch
and
doesn't
you're not trained.
stop.
Like we've not evolved to regulate food intake
Got it.
Like
of
salt.
that sort. Yeah, we're just not regulated. We've not evolved to have a natural kind of mechanism to stop us. And obviously, food industry knows that and design it exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like,
So
And
we're-
fries
yeah.
with the salt. I mean, they're delicious, right? And you-
right.
Yeah. With potato chips, kind of that the types of potato are specifically bred to be really high in sugar content, so that even a salty food like potato chips has still both very high sugar and very high fat content, and then you just can't stop. You're screwed. So that's processed food industry just screwing with us.
Yeah, so no matter what, any processed food's inherently bad. In terms of using this type of technology to burn fat, what's the mechanism of action there? And how does that relate to doing it in a fasted state versus eating a huge meal, having a bunch of sausages, and then jumping on the bike?
It's just very simple maths. For your second question, that is. But it's the way it works is by, number one, changing your insulin response. So if you have less insulin floating around, the ability to burn fat is there. So you want less insulin. Less insulin, more fat burns. So that's one. The second one is this afterburn that we talked about earlier. Much, 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 much greater. And the third is the fact that you get more mitochondria.
You mentioned that.
Yeah, and they are your power cells in
Right.
your whole body. And when you have more of them, even at rest, you're just burning a lot more. And it's like children, they're constantly running around, right? They just got so much mitochondria, they don't know what to do with all that energy. They're just bouncing around. As you get older, you lose more of it, unless you are exercising more. And so those are the three main ways of losing the fat. And I would say that you do feel less hungry when you're doing the rides. And in a fasted state, it's simple maths. You just feel very little sugar in your body at the time, right? And then you put more energy demand on your body, and you need the sugar for that energy. Well, where is it going to come from? It's going to come from your fat stores, assuming that there's not much left in your liver. The first place it'll go to. There's not much left in your liver. It'll draw sugar from fat, and it'll just go back and store it again, and it's clear again. So the more you keep doing it, the more fat is turning into sugar and being used for what it's supposed to be used for. It's supposed to not go here. It's supposed to be stored in your muscles, and that's where it goes, for burning in your muscles for the energy that it requires.
Do you guys have any testimonials or success stories or studies or anything that have been as miraculous as your oxygen uptake increase was? Have there been any, like...
Well, you've lost a lot of weight.
I mean, I've got my personal case study.
Yeah.
We've got it. No, we don't have it on our website. We've got it in a brochure. But yeah, since I've kind of our third generation bike came out last August, I got it at home in September. Then I do it very religiously. I do it every other day, just straight in the morning after getting out of bed in a fasted state. It's 8 minutes, hop on, hop off. It's, yeah.
Your whole workout's 8 minutes?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you do the fat burn in your garage?
I don't know which one I've been doing.
Okay.
I've been jumping around.
Okay.
I think it's maybe 9 minutes or something.
8 minutes 40 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Just
Okay.
under
Correct.
9
Oh, so
minutes.
same thing.
Apologies.
Okay.
So I've been massively off the mark, understating it.
Luke Sharp, see, picked up on the minute.
8 minutes, 40 seconds. Yeah, sorry for that. And I started losing weight. And then Christmas occurred, and I've been traveling a bit. It was 3 weeks on the road, first in Taiwan, then in Spain with family. And I just put on a bit more weight. And then I started my intermittent fasting together with CAR.O.L. And that just, had shocking impact. It's literally, the graph is, I falls off a cliff, and I lost some 25 pounds in 3 months with very little, so kind of nothing that I felt was particularly tiresome or a real burden in terms of cutting back on food. It was just like not having breakfast and having a light lunch and then normal family dinner, because it's important for us, normal family dinner. And it was, 25 pounds in 3 months. So ridiculously easy, actually. It was laughably
And you've never done it
easy.
before, yeah. And we
I've been not only lazy, but also didn't care too much about it. I was like happily married and thought, no, that's all right.
I'm with you there. I get it. It'd be nice to have a six-pack, but is it really going to change my life? No.
Yeah.
Especially if I got to go spend 45 minutes or 90 minutes.
No, but here's the thing. If you got one for free, would you have it?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
If I got one for every other day spending 9 minutes, probably, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking around whether I should mention. Yeah, no, I find I've got the not like my 10-year-old has more of a six-pack still than me, but
it's there.
I've got a six-pack of sorts, like as you can have in mid-40s.
Pack?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a one-pack anymore, so that's.
But to your question about testimonials, we do get a lot of people just writing into us, and definitely people are losing weight and they're getting fitter. And one guy,
we've got the data,
nuts.
so we see how our people are getting fitter. There's no question about it, absolutely. So and our users track very nicely the kind of predicted improvements, so that they have 10 to 12% on average VO2 max, or kind of our metric that measures cardiovascular fitness improvement after the first 8 to 10 weeks. Then another 10 to 12% after kind of 10 to 12 weeks. And then we have, we're not that long on the market. We have a few that went a lot further still. Those are kind of then in the super responder. But like absolutely, we see the data of our users, and it tracks very nicely what scientists in the lab have shown can be achieved with this exercise.
What about the benefits of doing this maximum intensity interval training, so I'm going to call it, I guess you kind of call it that, not only in a fasted state, doing the intermittent fasted, but what about if you threw the caffeine in there before?
Yes. Stacking the hacking.
Right?
Improves better.
Yeah, it does?
Definitely.
So more profound effects.
Yeah, the reason we don't necessarily advocate it is because we do have safety algorithms, right? So if people's heart rate is too high and doesn't recover quick enough, the rider aborts. And for some people, the caffeine just elevates their heart rate. But for people who don't have that issue response to a caffeine, can absolutely, in fact, it's great. Like as we were talking about it, cold shower, coffee, ride. It's stacking the hacking.
That leads me to my next question, and then I want to cover the AI thing before we wrap up, because that's I think what the secret sauce here is in many ways. What about doing this exercise in an extremely cold environment? I'm seeing now these like freezing gyms open up, and I love working out when it's really cold. Personally, that's my favorite. I hate feeling hot like this room is right now.
Yeah.
It's worth it because you guys are here with me. But have you done any experiments with that, any studies, or have any plans to encourage that? If someone, opened a CAR.O.L bike center, they could make it freezing, or...
They can do whatever they want.
That's a really interesting thought, and we might well try it.
No, we're not.
But the cold season's just around the corner. We might put one outside.
This is again getting to the realm. Frankly, it is the market of the 80% that doesn't exercise, and they are not going to faff around with stuff, like I'm going to go into the cold room and do they're not, just make it as easy for them. Look, I'm sure you of all people know better than anyone else, everything is about behavior change, and you just have to eliminate all the barriers to whatever it is that you want to do. And as much as the exercise would probably be a lot more effective doing it in a very cold environment. Exactly. I think it's the domain of a few people, of a small group.
A few nuts like me that are like, if I'm already going to be tortured for 2 bouts of 20 seconds of maximum intensity, I might as well do it while freezing my ass
Exactly.
out.
No, not that you're nuts, but
I am.
Well,
in my own
in a good way.
Special way.
Nuts are great. Sure. Nuts are wonderful.
I like to think of it as committed.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Committed to the point where I might, in fact, someday be committed. So when we're talking about collecting the data here, that brings me to the final piece, which is the AI element. And I think this is what's really fascinating, is that this technology knows what you're capable of and keeps pushing you, so that you talked about adaptability before, right? So when I was doing my HIIT things, if we did the same workout like on a Monday, then the next Tuesday I did the same one, my body's like, I remember these kettlebells and and it was exponentially easier as time went on. And so, thankfully the guy, my brother I was training with, it was always, changing things up and tricking you, but the body really does adapt. So is the AI part of how you can't adapt to this no matter how hard your body might try?
I think, again, back to behavior, humans will take the easy way out if you give it to them, right? And that's why in our system as well, other than the eye, and I will answer your question in a minute, we don't allow you to chain the resistance while you're doing the ride, because if you did allow that, people would dial it down, and then it just made the entire thing ineffective. So the reason we had to develop this kind of technology, and the AI had to be introduced, or self-learning had to be introduced, is because, remember, we've taken what Ulrich said earlier, what's been sitting around in a dark corner in the laboratory out into the marketplace. And in the laboratory, when the research happens, they know Luke's just walked in, looks really well, he's tall, he's got muscle, he's young, he's going to be able to produce X% of his body weight. He can exercise at X% of his body weight as the resistance, and they will apply that. But they'll be able to do that because they see you and they measure you and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, we have no idea when you register whether you are heavy because you're fat or you're heavy because you're muscular. So we have calibration rights. So when you first start, we start off at a particular place, and then we learn not just about your peak power capacity, but your total power, and very importantly, how fast you're getting tired. And based on all of that information, in your fourth ride, the exact resistance is set. It's computer-generated resistance, which is designed to wipe out your glycogen within the first 10 seconds. And we see that. I mean, we'll see it. Within 5, mostly people have peaked and starting to drop. But people get fitter. And that's why it's even better than what happens in the laboratory, because in the labs, once they set the resistance, that's it. It doesn't change for the duration of the exercise. But we're not trying to conduct an exercise, a lab experiment. We're trying to help people. So our system will continue to monitor those same parameters. And as you get fitter, you get less fatigued, right? You're producing more power, but you're getting less fatigued. And CAR.O.L will say, So she'll just increase resistance next time you come. Now, because we have no knobs, everything happens in decimal points. So it's always incremental, but it's always working with your ability. And it can go down too. If you're struggling, if it was too high, she'll bring it down. Or if we are where we want you to be, there'll be no change. So we plot a curve for every person, their performance curve. And that's how we make sure that you eventually get to your genetic set point. We all have we can't be, Arnold Schwarzenegger to infinity. there comes a point where that's it, and we'll see that again in the data. You know, particularly the fitness scores that we give you, your power per heartbeat, which is very important, and then we'll say, okay, it looks like that's pretty good. Now maintain it, and then we'll put them on a maintenance schedule.
And are there any other elements to the AI that make this unique?
I don't think so.
So we have under the hood.
Oh,
So
yes,
the
yes,
first
of
thing
course.
is, and that's really the most important, is how we set the resistance and how we optimize it and personalize it. Because only with the right resistance will you achieve that rapid glycogen depletion that will trigger the adaptation pathway. There are other elements under the hood. That's kind of making the bikes as precise as possible, for example. So we do everything in our power to make them like super precise, so that the values you see are actually what you get. We have a global leaderboard where some people get like really competitive, so you kind of know where you are and you know where you stand. We compete on that too. And then other elements is kind of to keep it safe. So the kind of signal processing, how we process your heart rate, and so on. There's kind of fairly advanced algorithms in there. We have the bike in, like most of our bikes are in a residential environment. Many are in a gym as well, but we also have it in offices, kind of in where it's not entirely open access, but where people who never exercise or haven't been haven't done anything before. And so for those, we do want to monitor a bit, kind of, what's their heart rate doing? Do we find so I should say this is absolutely as safe as any other exercise, but we still go that extra step that if there are certain signals in the heart rate, that we'd interrupt the ride and tell them maybe not today, kind of go tomorrow. Yes, exactly. So we try and kind of where CAR.O.L will go. We want her to be like an absolutely kind of AI-powered chatbot and your AI-powered health coach who can tell you kind of give you very precise, specific feedback on the exercise you're doing, whether you're putting the right level of effort in or not, whether you started too early, too late, can answer questions. And so there's a very, I feel like a child in a candy store when I think about our development roadmap, because there's fantastic plans that we still have, and she will be the Alexa of fitness. Like, we have no doubt that we'll be there very, very soon.
And why is it called CAR.O.L?
CAR.O.L stands for cardiovascular optimization logic, right? The inspiration came from HAL from Space Odyssey.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, nice. And HAL stands for heuristic algorithm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Heuristic algorithm, and also Vicky in iRobot, V.I.K.I.
Right.
And they all stand for the name of something.
Right.
And because our ambition is for CAR.O.L to become the AI coach, we wanted to give it a name, and it's a name that's accessible. CAR.O.L is not, something foreign, weird sounding. Yeah. And we're going to make CAR.O.L come. She's already quite flirty and quite witty and quite funny, so she has a relationship with you. But over time, there will be her face that'll manifest. Right now, because she just talks to you, we've released lips that are CAR.O.L symbol, and they're made up of little heartbeats. But after as she evolves, you'll see the nose, the eyes, the face, etc., and then you can actually talk to her, and she'll answer back.
And how is this different? I've been telling people about this because, of course, when I discover something new and awesome, I'm like, oh my God, have you heard? Like, working out doesn't have to suck as bad. And someone said, I think they were talking about maybe like a spinning bike. It starts with a P, like, oh, isn't that
Peloton?
like... Yeah, that. What?
Peloton, I have to say...
I don't know anything about, fitness machines and stuff like that, because as you know, I'm not that guy, but I was like, they asked me, what's the difference? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know.
Everybody says, oh, well, what's the difference between Peloton? And we say that the only similarity we have with Peloton is that they're both bikes.
Oh, I see.
Other than that...
Is Peloton like a spinning class bike or something?
Yes, so Peloton is basically, it's been an incredibly successful company, and hats off to John Foley, who's the founder, and his team for creating a phenomenal business. Like, hats off. We admire them enormously. But what they are doing is very different to what we're doing. You wouldn't catch us on a Peloton if you paid us, because we don't like long exercise, you know?
Oh, thank you.
And
okay. I'm sold.
and we don't
I'm done.
we don't really care about the entertainment. We basically like to get it over and done with. This is necessary evil. Fun for us is going to a restaurant, having a nice meal, going to the pub, going for friends, rather than 45 minutes with my favorite trainer and 100 million other people around the world who I don't even know. So it's a different need state. It's live streaming.
I see. Okay.
Of spinning classes, so you can join live classes,
God.
which is great for people who want to do that. But for people who don't want to do that,
well, target market right here. My name's Luke Story. I have a good friend actually from Canada, my friend Hardeep, and he's a spin class teacher, quite a popular one, and I think he lives in Toronto. Yeah, it's actually a Sikh guy. We were talking about Sikhs earlier. And he absolutely loves it, and I have friends that they do endurance biking and they go all over. I just, different strokes for different folks, but at least now I know the difference, so I can tell people that's more of a spin class thing. And I think why people think there's a similarity perhaps is because of the live streaming, not AI. But
it's a bike and it's got a screen, but that's really where the similarities stop.
Okay, cool. I'm glad I was able to clear that up. Well, I think I've covered what I wanted to cover. I think we've taken a deep enough dive to turn people onto something new and exciting. As I said, anytime I discover something that makes life easier in a more effective, pain-free way, I'm about sharing it. So I appreciate you guys, coming here today and finding the time. We're literally closing down the building now after all of these recordings. They just text me. They're like, dude, where are you?
Dude, where are you?
Oh, yeah, I just got a text from Tim. The building is almost empty. Who are you interviewing? LOLs. Everyone has left. Okay, I'm coming. I'm going.
Tim.
Yeah.
Lovely Tim.
Okay.
I will say one thing, because you love Kundalini breath. You might have noticed we've got mindfulness breath paces on our
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, that's because we feel that's really important. Good nervous system balancer. We can put a Kundalini breath on there next is coming.
Oh,
it's
excellent.
The victory breath. I tortured my children with it, and now I'm going to torture my riders with it. But it is very good, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, so we got to do this next question quick, because I think security is going to come kick me out of here with all my stuff. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced your life in any category, not just fitness or anything, that you might direct our listeners to go check out? Could be a book, a system of teaching, a modality, anything that people should go put in their life to make their life better.
Shall I go first?
Please do. I need a moment of thought.
It was very easy for me. So for a business perspective, Crossing the Chasm is absolutely brilliant read. Brilliant. And anybody who's doing technology or is thinking about starting a business must read it. It's nothing new as a concept in there, but the way the author presents it is very practical and very applicable for everyone. So that is almost my Bible. I love it. Then the second one would be the Gita. For me, is it's so simple in its messages, and everything that we talk about now about intention and stuff like that, it's just there, written all those years ago. That is the core message. You set your intention, and then you let it go, and you just do your job. Don't be attached to the outcome. Simple, right?
Wow.
Hard to do. Simple, hard to do.
That's the boil down of the Bhagavad Gita, which is 8 inches thick book.
Yeah, they don't go on, don't they? Go on and on and on. But that's the essence of it, right. And I think that's really important. So I try every day to see if I can follow that, and then. I don't know, the third book, which is going to sound really stupid. It's not really something that I will ever direct people to, because
Harry Potter?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's because it requires, I guess, a love for Gothic horror. So Carlos Ruiz Zafón, Shadow of the Wind or Moon. Can't remember, Shadow of the Wind or Moon, one of those two. It's a page turner.
Done.
So it's not really something that's life-changing, but it is just fantastic that somebody can have such incredible creativity and write Gothic horror in this day, and it's just
If
amazing.
it's a work of art that inspired you, it counts.
It's
I'm
a
gonna
work of
take it.
art.
All right, you had a long time to think about yours, but you better come with it.
Yeah. I'm a big autodidact, so
You what?
does that word not exist? Autodidact, like somebody who learns by himself. But so, can I just name one that is
Sure.
almost like that's one that's very, very close to my heart. Steven Pinker, Better Angels of Our Nature. So I'm a more rational person. Yeah,
I got that.
and he takes you in that book through kind of the history of violence over kind of time and for mankind and actually in the natural world. And I find he teaches just a very positive outlook on life and kind of helps us put into context everything we see around us. And I think it's a very positive, optimistic book, despite very gruesome detail in there. And I think that's like, if you ask me what taught that to me, just, you know, seeing the world actually as a very positive place and kind of having a very optimistic outlook as to where we're going, even though the news every day tell you that everything's going to shit. But no, it's good times, and I think there's great times ahead still.
Me too. That's why I don't want.
What's your favorite book, Luke?
My favorite book? Oh man, God, it sort of depends on the category. I would probably say one of the works by Dr. David R. Hawkins, who was a consciousness researcher and a spiritual teacher. And he's got a couple different ones. The most accessible is called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender.
Oh, you go.
Super, like, easy read. But then he has some more dense work that one of them took me about a year to get through.
Wow.
And it's called The Eye of the I, Reality versus Subjectivity. It's basically like teachings of non-duality. But I would say his teachings in general have probably been the most impactful on me.
Amazing.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. You're the first guest out of a couple hundred and something that have ever asked that. Turn the mic around. I love it. All right, you guys, let's get out of here. Before we do, what's your website if people want to go check out this technology?
www.carolfitai.com. Or if you Google Carol Bike, it should come up.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Glad we got to do this
That
one
was
in
really good
person,
fun.
too.
I wish we could do the Kundalini thing. It would be so interesting.
Oh, totally.
Or
right?
surrender. The whole idea of surrender is so
Well,
interesting.
maybe we'll do another philosophical podcast next time. Thanks for joining me, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.